Our presenter today is Carol Greenberg. She was born and raised in Toledo, where she attended Rogers High School. She has worked in the loan department of a local bank and 2 insurance companies. One is a rater for policies and one in the claims department. After taking time off to raise her 2 daughters, she went back to work for MAUMEE City Schools, where she worked as a traveling secretary. She actually worked at Union School for a few days when our, in the back, Rose was the principal there. She later met her partner of 30 years, Carlos Carvalho. They reside in Perrysburg and both have traveled the world extensively and have visited more countries than the United States has states. Some of their favorites have been China, the Baltic countries, North Africa, and South America. They did a medical mission in Peru where they had a chance to visit Machu Picchu. Of course, one of their unique travels has been to Egypt, and the audience today will see photos of their most memorable experience there. So we will let Carol tell us all about Egypt from Cairo to Abu Simbel. Carol?
Thank you for allowing me to give this presentation. Carlos and I were simply shocked and awed with Egypt. It was our most wonderful trip in many different ways. It was a demanding trip. We went through extensive heat, lots of walking, steps, sand, but it was extremely worthwhile. We wouldn't have traded this for anything in the world. We stayed at the Ritz on what is called the El Nil Corniche, which is the main street along the Nile River. Now, what's interesting is that this is the El Nil Corniche. There are no traffic lights. There are no lanes. And this is actually an island in the middle of the Nile River where it widens before it becomes the delta. So what's interesting about this island is at night, all around here are riverboats, party boats, casino boats, and they are extremely loud. They have music all night long. So if you want to stay at the Ritz, which is right here, and you don't want to hear this music until 5 a.m. in the morning, don't get a room facing the river. Get one that faces Tahrir Square, which is in the back of the Ritz. And this is Tahrir Square. This is where all the protests were held in 2011, and it is huge. So this is what downtown Cairo looks like. And then this is our boat of 48 people only. We were divided up into 2 groups of 24. It was extremely well run by Viking Cruises. This is the captain. He steers the boat with his feet. And this is me. I had a chance. We hit a lock about 11 o'clock one night, and it woke us up. And I went down to watch everything, and the captain allowed me to come into the room there and watch him steer the boat. So it was very interesting. Here's the top deck of the boat. And what is interesting here, whoops, you can see all the green right along the Nile. And then behind it are the mountains right here. This is the only part of the Nile right along here where anything grows, and it's a very narrow area. And then right here are all the mountains where nothing else grows, and there's not a palm tree, there's not any scrub, there's absolutely nothing there. This is a dining room. It was a very nice ship. Now I want to move on to the invention of the step pyramid. The king Dossier moved the royal cemetery to Saqqara. In 2050 BC, he built a tomb of a stack of 6 diminishing tiers. Corridors beneath were covered with tiles from the Blue Nile. The structure was about 200 feet tall. Voila, the world's first pyramid. Now we went inside here, and this is my buddy that kind of followed me around and took to me. Very nice gentleman. You can actually go way, way down inside of this pyramid. And here's one of the entrances into one of the other tombs there. So before we had the main pyramids on the Giza Plateau, this was really the first pyramid. So here's a picture of me with two of the tour guides there. Very nice fellas. And I always carried my trusty umbrella around to keep the sun off. Now we'll move on to the 3 most famous pyramids. Khufu, which is the largest pyramid, he was the father. Khafre was his son. And we think that it was his face who was on the Sphinx. And then Menkaure is the grandson. Now get a load of this. The tomb of Pharaoh Khufu, 2.3 million blocks, 5.5 million tons of limestone, 8,000 tons of granite, 500,000 tons of mortar. Took 26 years to build, and it's 454 feet tall. And contrary to those who have seen the Ten Commandments, the movie with Charlton Heston, it is believed that Hebrew slaves did not build these pyramids, that it was actually Egyptians who were very, very glad to build these pyramids because they would one day be the tomb of their pharaohs. Here's the Great Pyramid. It is so huge I could not get the whole thing in my camera. Right here, there's a small opening. It's hard to see, but you can see the people lined up. We went inside and we climbed approximately right here, some places straight up on iron ladders, some places where we had to bend over like this and walk. And we ended up in the sarcophagus chamber of Khufu. Now what was in there was absolutely nothing but a huge tub of granite, like a big bathtub. Of course, all his belongings had long been stolen. But it was an extremely interesting experience to be able to go into this pyramid. It is so huge, it takes about 45 minutes to walk around the perimeter. Now what kind of surprised me is this gentleman right here. He is just walking by that pyramid like he's going down a street in the United States walking his dog. Well, that's what my impression was. So maybe he had been there for a while, maybe he'd seen it before, but I just thought that was a little bit interesting. So here we are. We've come out of the tomb. We had to climb about 50 feet up to get to that entrance. But this was an experience that I just can't imagine. When I was a child, about 9 or 10, I used to sit on my dad's lap and we would look at the National Geographic and look at the pyramids. Never in a million years did I ever think that I would have the privilege of even going to Egypt, let alone going inside one of these pyramids. Now the bus took us around to another side of the Giza Plateau. what most people probably don't realize is that this plateau is high and you actually have to climb it. The buses park at the bottom of the plateau, and it's a pretty hard climb up there, so you need to be in very good shape. And of course here they found another tomb that they're excavating. Then we went to the camels. You can ride a camel. We had a gentleman who had a couple camels, and of course he coerced us to get on a camel. And we actually took a short ride. I'm gonna say, what do you think, Carlos? About 100 feet, maybe, something like that.
The short is for the money.
But you know, all I could think of was the theme from Lawrence of Arabia when we were doing this. But it was only 3 of us out of the group of 48 that rode the camels. And then, of course, the gentleman who took care of these 2 particular camels, he was an artiste of taking unusual photographs of us. This is my favorite of all. I think that's just a great picture. I paid him $10 for all this, and I think it was well worth it, and probably not enough, really, for the experience of this. Then on to the Sphinx. Now, we had a little bit of a difficult time, and I'm sorry that the picture did not come out very well, but it was so crowded there. There's a wall, like right up here, that you can't go beyond because there's a big pit here where they're still doing some digging. And it was very difficult to try and get a picture of the entire Sphinx. So here's about all that I got. And of course, we believe, as I said earlier, that this is King Khafre's head, and then the base is a lion. Here's a picture from the Sphinx area where this is the Great Pyramid here. You can see just how much it overtakes the entire everything, the entire space. Now after this, the next day, we flew from Cairo down to Luxor, which is the old Memphis, which was the former capital of Egypt during the time of the pharaohs. And we went to Karnak first before we got on the ship. Karnak is a temple that was built by Ramses II. It's 73 acres. And it was so hot there. I'm sorry, I did not get a whole lot of pictures because the temperature was over 100 degrees. And I went back to the bus. But here are the lions that line the walkway as you enter the main temple area. These are all the hieroglyphs that were on the walls of all these different areas of this temple. The temple is absolutely huge, and there are so many parts to it. Now, I want to draw your attention to these columns. This is called a hippo-style architecture. Rather than having flying buttresses like they do at Notre Dame and other places, the Egyptians used these huge columns to hold up this roof here. And these columns are huge. They're so big around that you can't get your arms around them. And of course they couldn't resist. They had to put their pictures and hieroglyphs all over them. Here's a good look through the main hallway and the famous obelisk right here. And I'm sorry I can't remember how tall it is, but it's tall. Here's a better picture of the Lion's Row right as you enter the main temple area. It was very, very crowded that day. And this was the end of October. And it was still very crowded, and it was still over 100 degrees. Here we see the hippo style again. This is the roof, and then the columns that are holding up that roof rather than having the buttresses. This is one of the pharaohs, and I don't remember his name. We were given so much information by the guide that day, it's hard to remember everything. But there's a small little pharaoh right here. This is another part of Karnak at the end. I did not go much further than this simply because you can just see how it's just sand and dirt. There's not a cloud in the sky. It never rains there. Never rains. They haven't had any rain for as long as they know. And here we have this hippo style again where the roof is here and the columns are all holding it up. Now I want to say something before I go on to the next part of the Valley of the Kings, which is on the opposite side of the Nile of Karnak. There are a lot of Egyptologists, a lot of tourists, a lot of archaeologists who say that if you go to Egypt and you can only see one thing, it shouldn't be the pyramids, it shouldn't be Karnak, it shouldn't be Abu Simbel, it should be the Valley of the Kings. And the reason they say that is because of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different paintings and figures and carvings that is totally amazing. We visited 3 tombs. This is Ramses II tomb, and you can see even on the walkway, the ceiling, all the figures and everything. It's amazing. And the painting still looks like it was done yesterday. And of course, they love snakes. This is just one small wall in one tomb. You can imagine all the work it took and the painting that it took just to make this one wall. And this is why, as I said, some people think if you go to Egypt, just go see and you can only see one thing, just go to the Valley of the Kings. And Queens, as we'll get to the Queen. Now you can see what I was talking about where the Nile is a relatively narrow river. It's not anything like the Amazon. We have been down the Amazon. The Nile is supposedly the longest river in the world, although Brazilians have argued that the Amazon is because they found another little tributary. But the Nile is not very wide. And so they just have a very, very narrow path, as I showed you earlier, on each side of greenery. And the rest is all this, it's just rock. There's nothing there. There's nothing that survives. And what our guide is doing, I think, is that he's giving us tickets to go see Queen Hatshepsut's temple. This is the only female pharaoh that we know of, unless you want to count Cleopatra. But unfortunately, this is the temple where all the Germans were killed about 30 years ago. About 50 of them were shot right here. And she is the only female pharaoh. Now this temple is further away than it looks. It's a pretty long walk from where the bus was up to the temple. Here's a close-up of the temple. We had to go up these stairs to go inside here and see all the paintings and the carvings. It's a wonderful temple. And there's Carlos right here. Here's a close-up. You could either go up all these steps or go on the ramp. This is not a trip for wheelchairs or walkers. There were a couple in our group that had canes, but they had a very difficult time. So just be aware of that. And this is a lineup of the Queen. Now she decided to take on the beard that the male pharaohs did, the artificial beard. She wanted to look like the males. And here's the inside of that room. Look at all these carvings. It's just simply stunning. You just can't believe all the paintings and the carvings and everything that went on, what they were able to do. And this is the outside. These are some old pharaoh carvings on their way out. Then our next stop was going to be, we're gonna go up north or south on the river to Kina, to Dendera. Now this is another temple. We're not exactly sure who built it, but these columns are absolutely huge. And it's believed that this temple was used more, I don't know what word I could use, like Epstein's Island, unfortunately. It was a place to party. It was a place for debauchery. It was a place for everything that they felt that they couldn't do in a main temple. This is the columns, and again we have the hippo style. Here's the roof, and here's these huge columns that are supporting that roof, and they're carved like palm leaves. It's amazing. And what is interesting about going here is, and I'm not quite sure why, we had a police escort in the bus. We had police cars in front of us, motorcycle cops in front and back, and they stopped all the traffic for us to go into this temple. I don't know if something had happened there or if they were nervous about something, but it was a very interesting experience. Then we went upriver to Esna. This is an actual town, a town that's very hit with poverty. This is how you will see most of the people in Egypt, how they live. This is a alleyway. You can see what the roof looks like to protect them from the sun. I'll give $1 to anybody who thinks they know what this gizmo is right here. It's an olive oil press. And this gentleman was making olive oil. And I asked him, it was polite in Egypt to always ask first before you take a picture of a person. And I gave him $1. Anybody know what these might be? Caskets. Coffins. Here's a little, like a tuk-tuk car, just sitting there, and I presume it's being used. It looks, because it looks like there's a gasoline can in there. And yes, they are still using donkeys Nobody had a car there. I didn't see a car at all. Did you, Carlos, remember? Now, this gentleman here is making a mattress out of Pima cotton for a couple who was getting married. It was going to be a present for them from someone, and he's making that for them. Here's the Pima cotton in the bags. And what impressed me about all the residents of this little town was they didn't seem unhappy. They didn't seem like they knew that they were poor. They didn't seem like they were upset to see people like us, tourists who are well-to-do. You can see he's smiling. He's very proud of his product. And here's another gentleman. Look how happy he is. But look at his little shop here where he's some sort of a seamstress making things. He's barefoot. He doesn't have any water, probably no toilet or anything like that, but yet he doesn't seem unhappy about his living arrangement. Here's another alleyway with a donkey and a cow. And this is the main part of the city. Now, the boys seem a little bit more anxious about how they're living than the older folks, and this is just a random picture I took. It just was a little bit odd to see this tractor. Then, the next day, we went down to Aswan. We flew to Aswan to see Abu Simbel. A little bit about Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel was built by Ramses II, and these are his figures, all four of them. They're about 60 feet tall. Now this one right here, I'll give you a little background first. Most of you probably know that the world, and especially archaeologists and geologists, were horrified in the early 60s when they found out that King Nasser was going to build a dam and that Abu Simbel was going to be flooded. And so there were 32 countries that got together and thought, we have to do something. We have to move them, we have to stop the dam, we have to do something. We just cannot lose these statues. So what the final decision was, now these statues are built in the side of a mountain. They're not statues that were, made and put there. They're actually carved into the rock, into the sandstone. And there's this mountain right behind here of where they were carved out of. And here's us in front. I never thought that I would ever be able to see these statues like this live either. Here's a close-up of one of them, and of course the hieroglyphs. So what they decided to do is these 32 countries got together, and they decided we have to move the statues. They thought, how are we going to do this? There was a lot of argument going on about how they were going to do this and who was going to be in charge. So ultimately, it was a Polish builder who was in charge of everything of moving these statues. Now, this one right here that lost his face There was a lot of talk and arguing about when we move the statue, should we repair that face or should we just leave it as it is? And my vote was, if I had a vote in this, I would say it should be left as it was. So ultimately, they decided that when they moved them, they had to make the statue the same. What happened was, there's a better picture here. Right here, there was an earthquake and the face fell off. And when they redid the other symbol, they just left the pieces of rock right at the bottom as they found them. So what they ended up having to do was they actually built a new fake mountain. I'm not exactly sure what the material was, but they put some sort of a resin over it here to make it look like the sandstone before. And then piece by piece, they took all these statues apart and moved them, and you can see what a great job they did of putting them all back together, like a big jigsaw puzzle. It's amazing. It was an amazing architectural piece of work. Here we are at the dam, as Chevy Chase would say. This is Lake Nasser. This is the lake that was created when the dam was built. It was meant to control the spring floods of the Nile. Then we went, let's see, we flew back to Luxor, and then we took the boat up to, upriver to Obo, which is a big Nubian area. The Nubians were there when the pharaohs were there. They didn't get along very well. The Nubians actually invaded the pharaohs' lands, and they had several battles, but now they're living in relative peace. So we had to cross the Nile to get to this Nubian village. So this is the boat, one of the boats that we took to cross the Nile. And this area, this town looks totally different than Esna, as you can see. It's very colorful, the people seem happy, it's more modern. There's palm trees. Here's a building, and you can see again how there's just a little scrub on the edge of the Nile, and then back here it's all rock, unlivable. Here's the main part of town. Very nice modern buildings. Now here's a home that we visited. And this little boy, you can see right here, this is either a couch or a bed or a seating area. And the floor is sand. Now Carlos, who at this time is sleeping, yes you are. Carlos has always said he has not figured out why I like to hold reptiles. Every place we've been where there's been a reptile, I've always wanted to hold it, whether it's a toad, a frog, a python, a huge iguana. So, of course, going to Egypt, I had to hold a reptile. And what kind of reptile do you think it was? Right there, little crocodile. They have its mouth tied shut. But, I paid $5 to do that. But, you have to pay to do everything there, you know? But, I don't know, I just like to do things like that, unusual things that you don't get to do in other places. And here's another part of the inside of this home. I have to believe that Viking and the other cruise ships that visit here probably have to contribute some sort of financial aid to these people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to live as well as this. So here we are sitting down and having a little lecture by the guide about the town. Very nice. Then we went up to, next stop is called Obo. This is the temple of Horus. Horus was the falcon god. And he was very, very well, he was a major god of the Egyptians, and this is inside of his temple. Carlos says this is what, a bear or a pig? I don't remember. Or a bull? I don't think, well, I'm not exactly sure. Or a hippo? Could be a hippo. Here's Horus. Here's some carvings on the outside. And here's Carlos being the temporary guide. This is our guide right here. He's an Egyptologist. He was excellent. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not. It didn't come out very well. But it is a carving, and right here, I don't know if you could see like the outline of a side of a woman's head. And here is a profile of her. And over here, there's a man. And she has her arm around him. And our guide said this is the only place that they have found in Egypt where there is a carving that shows affection between a man and a woman. They've never ever found any other carvings like this. So here we are. We're going back to our ship, and we are in this little carriage here. And you can see what the traffic is like. All of Egypt is just like this. It's stunning, the traffic. Now, I want to end this with, this is not my picture, but the Egyptian guides talked a lot about the Rosetta Stone. And I don't know if everybody knows what the Rosetta Stone is. The Rosetta Stone was found by Napoleon when he was invading Egypt. And what this stone enabled Egyptologists to do was to decipher hieroglyphics. Without this stone, they couldn't figure out anything about what the hieroglyphics said or meant. Well, what happened is Napoleon took it, and I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but now it's in the British Museum in London. And the Egyptians want it back. I mean, they really want it back bad. And, you know, they say it's their property, it was stolen from their country. But I just wanted to show you this at the end of the presentation, give you an idea of, without this Rosetta Stone, you wouldn't have books on Egyptology and how they were able to decipher what all these little carvings and hieroglyphs said. So I will end the presentation here if there's any questions. Yes,
The Aswan Dam, when it was built, are there more statues down there, or was that the entirety of the statue?
are you talking about Abu Simbel? Or how far is Abu Simbel from the dam?
No, the statues that were moved,
Yes,
are there more statues?
no,
That's all?
that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a big lake there. And there's snipers all over the place, just like there are in Hoover Dam. Yes, a gentleman back there standing up.
Yes, if you went up to Detroit today and flew over there, how long should you stay and what would it cost, would you guess?
We went to Jerusalem first for 4 nights, and we flew from Tel Aviv to Cairo. Our cruise was including 3 nights in Cairo was 13 days. I don't see how you can see all that in less than 13 days. And we spent a good amount of money. We flew business class. If you didn't fly business class, you could do it cheaper. I think it was probably about $10,000 a piece just for the cruise, and then we bought our own airfare on top of it, which was probably another $6,000 a piece. Yes, sir. With the cap on. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a lady.
When did you do this trip? It doesn't
We-
look like you got to go to the museum.
We did this in October of 2018. They were just starting to build the museum then, so no, we did not get, but we did go to the museum in Cairo, and we did see Tut's mask there, but we weren't allowed to take any pictures. Now, my understanding is now, with the new museum, you're able to take pictures of Tut. In fact, when we went to the museum in Cairo, the original museum, they made us put our cameras on like a shelf, and our phones too. Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
You
Judy.
mentioned that 50 Germans were killed and at that one temple site
Yeah,
about 20, 25 years ago.
it's around 97. In fact, it was right before we were set to go to Israel for the first time. It was a major, it was all over the news. I still remember it, and when we were going to go to Israel for 2 weeks, my daughters were on the phone bawling and saying, don't go, don't go, don't go. But, you know, we went. But they have snipers everywhere. We had 2 armed guards on our boat, one with a rifle and one with a handgun. And we had an armed guard on the bus and next to the driver every time we went anywhere in the bus. At the tourist sites, there are military all over the place. At the entrance, behind big iron guards, and they're watching everything. They're very careful because tourism is what gets them the most money in that country. You know, if the tourists are scared away, then they're not making any money. Yes?
What kind of camera did you use, Carol?
I had a Canon ELPH. Just a little handheld camera. It fits in the palm of my hand. And the reason I use that is because I'm short. And you really need 2 hands for a cell phone. So I can just put my arm up like this, quick, you know, to get a picture about everybody else. So, but I wanted to say a couple of things about the culture, and if you go, Egyptian money is not available outside of Egypt. If you want Egyptian pounds, you have to wait until you get there to get them. And really the only place to get them that we could find, we stayed at the Ritz. There was a bank right inside the Ritz, a regular bank, where we exchanged money for Egyptian pounds. And if you want to exchange money, your US dollars have to be pristine. They can't be folded, they can't be torn, they can't be dirty, they can't be dog-eared, or they won't accept them. Don't ask me why, that's just the way it is. And even the merchants don't want to accept, most merchants will accept US dollars, but they don't want folded dog ears or dirty bills. But it's ironic that if they give you change back, the money's dirty. So, and the other question some of you might have is alcohol allowed there? Yes, it is. But it's horrible. No, it really is. And our guide told us they purposely make it that way because they don't want people to drink. But we brought our own liquor in from the airport in Tel Aviv, and Viking allows us to have liquor on the ship. So that is what we use beside the beer and wine that they served us on board, which was Egyptian beer and wine. It wasn't too bad, but it certainly wasn't like it is in the States. And I went into the bar in the Ritz one night to have a drink, and it was horrible. Like, it was supposedly a martini, but it was just horrible. But there is alcohol there allowed, so. Yes, sir, the back.
You mentioned 30 Germans were killed. What was that about?
I didn't get the last part.
30 Germans were killed, you mentioned on one of the slides.
At Shetsu's temple.
Yeah, why was that?
It was just a terrorist attack by people with rifles, and it was a massacre. I still remember it. It's never gone out of my mind, and that's why there are so many guards around everywhere there. Any other questions? Yes.
Were the Germans tourists?
Yes. They were a group.
And were the terrorists, like, would they be affiliated with the Houthis or the ISIS or anything like that?
I don't think ISIS existed then, and I'm not sure about that. I'm sure if you did a Google search when you get home, it would come up to say tourist killings at Head Shetsu. It'll come up. But you know, people have said to me, "Weren't you afraid to go there? There's a warning from the State Department." As far as I know, there's always been a warning there forever, and it's never going to go away. So, you know, it's up to your comfort level, how you feel. We felt well protected. I was never afraid. We went to the big market in Cairo at night, but we had a guide at the head of the line, and there was a security guard at the back of the line who took all our pictures in his cell phone. He knew everybody in the group. When we got back on the bus, he stood by the door of the bus, he looked at his phone, he made sure that everybody getting on the bus was part of the group. Yeah.
Is there anything to honor Cleopatra in Egypt?
That subject was never brought up. We did go to, what's the place in Tunis? I can't think. Carthage in Tunis, but that's really another story, another segment. Okay. Any other question? Yeah.
You said you had gone to Northern Africa?
Yeah.
We're getting ready to go to Uganda and Tanzania. Any quick little advice?
We just went to Tangiers and Algiers for the day.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. So that's. Oh, okay.
Do you think that trip was expensive?
I don't know what's expensive to you. We spent probably $12,000 a piece with the airfare, business class airfare, and the cruise. We didn't really spend a whole lot of money there. We didn't have to. Everything was included. The only thing that we spent extra on was flying to Abu Simbel, and that was like $250 a piece.
And how long were you gone?
13 days in Egypt. I don't know if my time is up or
What year was that again?
2018,
Okay, thank you.
October, and it was still hot. Okay, thank you.